Happy Friday. It's been 1 month since we've spoke on this podcast. How you doing, Deuce?
I'm good. I'm happy to be back. I'm glad that we took a month off to gloat.
Yeah, a little bit has changed in the Philadelphia area in this month.
Yeah, I had kind of rubbed off on the other teams until the Bullets took down the Sixers, but the whole city was running hot for 4 weeks.
Well, let's start right there with Super Bowl thoughts, Super Bowl recap before we get into our 2018 PGA preview. Obviously, the big story to me has to be the way Foles played and Doug Peterson's aggressiveness. But what do you think when you think back to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I honestly can't remember exactly what we said in our preview, but I think we, kind of hit it on the head. The weakness of New England's defense was worrisome if you were a New England fan or were going to back the Patriots. I think we both thought that the only way New England would win is if Brady had one of those games, and he did have one of those games, and he still lost.
505.
He might have the best game of any quarterback in Super Bowl history. I think it just shows you how bad that defense is from a personnel perspective. I'm not a Matt Patricia guy. I think his defenses are pretty vanilla, but I'm not sure how much he really had to work with. But credit to Foles because, he made every right decision. And Peterson, I thought, called a perfect game.
Yeah, we talked a couple times throughout the year, especially when it came to Pittsburgh and then the Jacksonville game against New England, that they played almost not to lose rather than staying aggressive. And I think that's the only way to beat New England. I guess when I think back on it, I'm not surprised the Eagles won. I'm surprised the way they won. If you told me Brady was going to throw for 505, which was almost an all-timer, and they were going to score 33, I would have said the Eagles have no chance.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised. I mean, Brady, he looked very sharp, so I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm surprised at how poor Philly's defense played. They made the play when it needed to be made, but even on that play, it's kind of a philosophy New England goes with in the 2-minute drill. They try to avoid throwing to the backs, but James White was wide open on the strip sack play. But guys were wide open all night long. So a little bit surprising from Philly's defensive perspective, but on the other side, guys were even more wide open running through the New England defense. So, I think Peterson came into the game going to be aggressive, but I think once he saw how the game was flowing, knew he had to be more aggressive than he even thought.
You hit it right on the head. I remember the preview thinking back that the Eagles were going to have wheel route options all night long, and they hit two big ones. One by Clement to set up the touchdown right before half, and then they hit Clement for a touchdown on one. And then the other thing that you hit right on was Ertz was going to have a big day. Shockingly, I don't know how Patricia or Belichick didn't double him when it mattered towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I don't know either. He's clearly the most athletic guy they had, matchup-wise. I expected Alshon. The Butler thing was weird. Wasn't anticipating it, so that kind of threw a wrench into the preview a little bit. I think once they put Gilmore on Alshon, that kind of neutralized him. Nelson Aguilar was open every single play. He could have had a game for the ages, but there were just so many other guys open. They also rushed the ball, I think, in the first half for 10 yards a pop. I thought New England would sell out to stop the run, but it kind of looked opposite. It looked like in the first half they gave Philly the run, which to me immediately settles Foles down and gives him confidence that they can move the ball either way, which you just can't do.
Gronk got his, but I thought despite not getting pressure and giving up 33, I thought the Eagles really turned the game by putting Jenkins on the running back side of the backfield, which is where I thought New England was going to have the most success.
Agreed.
I think
it was unexpected and it was a great move.
I think the running backs ended up with 3 catches for maybe 25 yards.
Yeah, and I think most of that was in the first half. New England didn't really try to run it. They weren't successful when they did. You know, it's hard to say what would have happened. I think losing Cooks was a big time factor. That speed going off the field, I think, really allowed Philly to play packed in, let Jenkins roam around with the backs. They didn't have to double Cooks when he's not in there. You know, I think that played a little bit of a factor. But I don't know if it would have changed the outcome of the game.
Did you think that Patricia and McDaniels interviewing had any effect on the game or game planning or preparation?
I don't, no. I think it would have been, if you start rolling out the same guys, I think they would have had the same matchup issues either way. I just think they might be the worst matchup in the league that night for New England.
I completely agree. For how bad New England was on defense, I do think that they probably win the Super Bowl against many other teams in the NFC.
I agree. I think they win the Super Bowl against any other team in the league that night. I just think Philadelphia's coaching style, and some of their personnel, they don't wow you with skill players, but that's not really how you beat New England, as proven by Pittsburgh the last 10 years. Best skill guys in the league, they can't beat the Patriots. I just think they have the exact formula to beat New England.
We talked a little bit before we went live with the podcast. I mentioned to you that I've watched the Atlanta game a couple times and how lucky they got. But you mentioned Nelson Aguilar. That's where I really think the season turned around, is when Jordan Matthews hurts his hand in training camp. They end up trading him and just throwing Aguilar in the slot to see how it goes. I thought that's what really turned the offense around this year.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he brings a different element. He brings that quickness. You know, he's got speed. I wouldn't say he's one of the faster guys in the league, but he's really fast in short spaces. And, you know, that's just, you kind of need that, and specifically in that offense. And Matthews is so much like Alshon. I just think that's two similar guys that are much easier to defend than Aguilar.
Well, I think you went 12-1 in picking 4 against the Eagles this year. We finished the year football-wise 88-71, 55%. We have March Madness coming up, NBA playoffs, so we can build upon that.
I think it's a solid year. I think 56 to 58, you're really killing it over an entire season. So I'll take 55 every year.
I think that puts us 30 games over 500 as a career since the podcast has started. So, yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to add on the 2017-18 football season?
I don't think so. Congrats to the city of Philly. I know you waited personally a long time for that one.
It feels good to finally have some jewelry on the finger.
Grease the poles.
We'll be back. Actually, a quick ask, Combine this week. Anybody that you're really excited to watch or see how their stats pan out in the Combine?
Not really, just because the Combine has changed a little bit. I think it's more like the guys who are trying to prove themselves. I'm curious, just, freak talent-wise, I'm curious to see what Saquon runs in the 40. Just because if he runs something stupid, I can't even imagine the hype train. I think he's a solidified top 5 pick, but if he runs, 4.35, it'd be interesting to see if he can kind of get his name up there for number 1.
I was going to ask you if there's any way he could jump into the number 1 spot.
I think he's got to run 4.3s to kind of make that leap, because that puts him in production and time-wise. That would put him in a category of the all-time greats. I think that's the only way it happens.
I agree with you. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll be back in 2 weeks, talk NFL free agency, and then we'll start preparing for the draft. But today, we turn our attention to the 2018 PGA Tour preview. Obviously, we've had some tournaments under our belt. I like where we're doing this year, the podcast. being able to see some play before we start giving some predictions. So give me your thoughts on the West Coast swing and the few tournaments that we've seen here on the East.
Yeah, we've had some kind of a mix so far this year. Big name winners, John Rahm, Jason Day, Justin Thomas won last week. Dustin blew everyone away in Hawaii, so we've had some big names. And we've had a couple guys, Patton Kazire, a lot of people don't know who that is. He's won twice already this year. And how about old Ted Potter Jr., the Wizard, winning at Pebble. So, we've had a couple of good storylines so far this year.
Who has stood out to you in terms of playing well in what we've seen so far?
I think the two names that jump off the stage right away, continuing from last year, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson. If you probably ask 10 golf fans, my guess is 9 minimum say Jordan Spieth is a better player than Justin Thomas. I think this is a big year for Justin Thomas in that narrative. If he picks off a major, throws in 2 or 3 more wins, and Spieth has kind of an average year, I think he can kind of flip that narrative a little bit to being, better than Spieth and not George Spieth's friend.
Yeah, that is a good point. It is the Jordan Spieth friend thing is interesting. How that is still the narrative when you look at the stats that Thomas has put up.
Yeah, he last year really got comfortable winning. He kind of got the taste of winning, and he really ran with it. His game is built for traditional PGA championship type majors. But the one he won last year, I thought was one of the more difficult PGA Championship venues we're going to see. It played kind of in between U.S. Open, PGA Championship. So I think his game is more well-rounded than just those long, soft golf courses. I really do think he can flip that narrative. So we'll see, but he's a stud.
I thought it was interesting.
Whiny stud, but he's a stud.
I thought it was interesting last week that, at least on Sunday, he did get that break with the ball hitting the wall and bouncing onto the green. But he certainly didn't have his best stuff and still hung in there, and he was able to get the W.
I think the quick transformation from college to pro, your game is kind of one-dimensional in college. I'm really impressed with his wedge game. For such a powerful player, his wedge game last week was very impressive. In the wind, too, he's a very high ball hitter. He won last week on a very difficult, windy golf course, which, if you're kind of trying to pick a guy or guys that are going to do well in the future, that type of versatility to me is big time.
Flipping the page, who has not looked so good that you may have thought would get off to a good start this year?
It's early, so this is, nitpicking a little bit, and expectations are a little bit different for some guys. You could go through the list and probably have 50 guys that haven't played well, but, they're average tour players. We'll go with Rory, Ricky, and Spieth, just, get some big names in there. Last 3 years, before the Masters, Spieth has picked off a win somewhere. Not so far this year. He's still got an event or two to do it, but hasn't quite put it all together, and he is shockingly 164th on tour in strokes gained putting. So that is the weakness right now, which is traditionally his strength. Rory's only played 3 events on tour. He was in the Middle East, but maybe it's just me. I expected a huge year for him, and for him to start miscut T59, T20, just not what I expected. His short game and wedge game looked horrific. I'm not sure what he works on. He should be just like Dustin Johnson, where he's got the power, he's got the ball striking. Just go to the range and hit some wedges, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And then Ricky Fowler, 2 missed cuts in the last 3 events, and that 3rd event he held the 54-hole lead and couldn't convert, which is a trend. He's now 1-7 after leading 36 holes on tour, so not a closer by any means.
How about your biggest surprise so far, whether good or bad?
I have a few written down. I'm going going to stick with Rory, though, just because I thought he would have a huge year coming off an off year last year. I really thought he was just going to, kind of see everyone else having success. And he hasn't, last 2 years, hasn't really been in the mix. I know he won 2 years ago, but, wasn't a major. Hasn't really been in the mix in a major now in 3 or 4 years. I thought this would be the year he'd really kick it into gear, and obviously there's still time, but a couple golf courses that he's had success in the past, he really have not looked great. It's concerning, though, how bad his short game is. I think that's why it's a surprise to me.
You followed as closely as anybody. One name that I had written down for a surprise, and maybe you saw it coming, was Alex Noren.
Yeah, so he's probably a surprise just because he plays mainly on the European Tour. He dabbled a little bit last year over here, had some good finishes, but he's won 10 times on the Euro Tour. So he's been an established player for a long time. The casual golf fan doesn't follow the world golf rankings, but he's been in the top 50 now for a while. He had a stretch the last 18 months where he won 4 times in I think 6 months. So he's been hot. He's been playing really well. He's well known as one of the better putters on the Euro Tour, and we'll get into this in a little bit. You will definitely see him on that European Ryder Cup team.
Well, we've gone 5 minutes without mentioning Eldrick's name, so give me your thoughts on what you've seen from Tiger so far.
Yeah, I figured we would talk about him by himself. That's why I left him out of the surprises. But I've been surprised in a good way with him. I know the name people expect so much from him, but think almost 3 years off of golf. And, I don't know how much he's played or hasn't played, but competitive golf's so different. For him to even look confident is surprising to me. I thought there would be a little more rust. I thought this past week, specifically at the Honda, was very encouraging. I know people were down after the miscut of Riviera, but if you look back in his prime, A, either didn't play Riviera, or B, didn't play it very well. It just has never fit his eye as he's followed Tiger's career. There are 10, 12 courses that he loves, fits his eye, and he sticks to playing those. So, kind of an expected result there. I thought this week at Honda, very difficult golf course. In the wind, which exposes mishits even more. I thought he looked great. He still hits the, 1 out of every 3 or 4 tee shots are off the planet, but that's kind of what he's been always. Short game looks great. I think he can just putt a little bit better. I think he can win somewhere. I don't know where, but somewhere.
I mentioned to you that his putter is what separates this Tiger from the Tiger that we watched dominate for all those years. And just by my eye, I don't know what the stats say, he's not a terrible putter right now, but it shows you just how dominant and amazing of a putter he was.
So there's 4 categories I went back and looked at after you brought that up. His power, his long iron play, 175 to 225. His wedge game, 50 to 125, and his putting. His power is back. He's hitting it just like he used to. Now, 4 guys are hitting it that far, so it's a little bit, it's not as big of an advantage as it once was. But the other 3 categories, he was either first or second on tour half his years that he dominated. His long irons, his wedges, and his putter, which is unbelievable for a guy that hits it that far. That would be like Dustin Johnson leading the tour putting, wedge game, and iron game for the next 10 years. Just insane. And now, all 3 of those categories he's average in. The sample size isn't huge, just, 2 weeks, so we'll see what happens moving forward. But to me, those are kind of the 3 key categories for him.
Just 3 months ago, I think the question would have been asked, would you be shocked if Tiger won? I think it's flipped completely. Would you be shocked if he didn't win?
Oh, good question.
Somewhere along the way, I'm not saying a major, just some...
This year or in totality?
2018.
That's a tough one. I think I would be surprised if he won. Only because what is he going to play in? 10 events, 12 events,
Sure.
15 events?
Sure.
If it's 10, I would be a little bit shocked that he wins. If he plays 15, that means he's adding something like Travelers or Wyndham, something like that. If that's the case, then I would be more surprised if he did not win.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of majors, Augusta, a month away.
Yeah, the boys coming fast.
Well, let's start there. Who do you have your eyes on as we come down the stretch to Augusta?
You know, it's kind of weird that throughout all the course changes, the lengthening, the taking out trees, this similar players keep popping up on the leaderboards. Certain types of players. I honestly think the course is made for Bubba. You know, the lefty that hits the high fade, to me, is just the course now is just made for him. So if he can somehow put it together that week, I think he can win another one. That's not my prediction. But I think the course is made for somebody like that. To me, though, it's probably a little bit of a cop-out. I'm going with last year's runner-up, Justin Rose. I just think when he starts hitting the ball well, and he has been playing well, he's hard to beat at a place like that where you just keep putting it in the middle of the green. It's hard to beat a guy like that. Since 2010, his worst finish at Augusta is 25th. So 7 trips, he's not been outside the top 25. Last 3, he has 2 runner-ups and a T10, so he's knocked on the door. And I think if you go back in history and look at guys that keep knocking on the door, specifically here, they usually break through. The one guy that really didn't was Ernie Els. So I'm gonna keep backing the guy that's knocking on the door.
Could this be the one of the more exciting Masters leading up to that we've had in a while, with the reemergence of Tiger, Justin Thomas, the youngster, playing well.
Yeah.
DJ looks to be playing consistent. Spieth is always going to be talked about. As you mentioned, Fitz Bubba. Phil's still playing well. Who knows what we're getting out of Rory or Fowler. When I look at it, I know we talked about it last year, and DJ obviously got hurt. Tiger didn't play. All of a sudden, it looks like we have the makings of one of the better Masters if I can remember leading up to it.
I can't think of one with more storylines. You could probably pick a storyline down to about 10 maybe. Phil, like you said, playing well. Can he somehow couple up the magic one more week? He's playing really well. He didn't have a great year last year, but 3 straight top 10s for Phil on tour. The Tiger narrative, obviously, is probably the leading one going into the Masters. Maybe this is a good thing for Rory, that he won't be talked about. He's trying to complete the career Grand Slam. He has top 10s at Augusta the last 4 years. So he's knocked on the door, sort of. So maybe this is a good thing that no one's talking about him. Fowler never won a major. Who knows if he'll get one. Certainly has the talent to. DJ, the cabin fall last year, looked like he was just a buzzsaw going into Augusta. So, there's a list of 15 other things we could get to here, but I think this is probably going to be the most hyped Masters ever.
2 months later, we go to Shinnecock for the U.S. Open. Obviously, we expect it to be playing difficult. I don't know if we fully know how the USGA is going to set it up, but as you think about it, who do you think it's going to set up for?
So this one's interesting. The course has gone through a couple renovations, restorations since the last time we saw it, trying to get it back to what it once was. If remember play, it had been widened a little bit. I read that the USGA wants to, for this event, narrow it back down. They've added a little bit of length, but for a U.S. Open or a modern U.S. Open, It will not be that long. Shinnecock's defenses are wind, rough, and severe greens. Last time we saw the U.S. Open, Keith Goosen was the only guy that could two-putt on these greens, and he won. It is sort of, this is going to be not full-blown British Open, but I think this is going to be a very weather, wind-dependent event. If it's not windy, I think you can see a bunch of the, bombers kind of take this course over. If it is windy, I think you get a good mix on the leaderboard. And it will be a traditional survival test. But if it's not windy, I don't know how they control the scores without the wind on a course that's not very long. So we'll see. But I kind of like Jason Day here. Picked off a win at Torrey Pines. Traditionally a very good, difficult golf course player. 5 top 10s in U.S. Opens in 7 appearances. So that's really good. He probably should have won at Marion. Came up 1 shot short. Marion, to me, is probably the most difficult venue they've had the last decade. But I think it might be the best comp to Shinnecock. We'll see. The weather at Marion that week was very wet. But I think if you're looking for a course comp, it might be closer to that than anything else.
It's unfair to even ask this as we talk about the Open and its return to Carnoustie. You never know what the weather's going to be. You never know who's going to get the good draw, who's not. But who, traditionally, the Open's at Carnoustie, who has it set up for?
Sergio got his heart ripped out there. He also played well the other time he played there. So if you're looking for a favorite right now, if he gets his game in order, now he's expected to have a baby in the next month. So we'll see what that does to his schedule, how much he plays leading up to it. But to me, he would be the favorite. He hits his ball so well. He can flight it. He can hit it both ways. If it's windy at Carnoustie, it might be the hardest golf course in the world. So like you said, totally weather dependent. If it's not blowing, then who knows? It's birdie fest on those links courses. But to me, Stenson, Garcia, guys like that who just wear the sweet spot out are the favorites over there.
And Glory's last shot heads to Bellerive in St. Louis. Could you tell us about Bellerive and early pick?
Yeah, we haven't seen Bellerive too often. Last time was 2008, the BMW Championship and the playoffs won by Camilo Villegas. Kind of a weird leaderboard back then. That was Tigers when, all that news broke. Dudley Hart, Anthony Kim, Jim Furyk, Hunter Mahan, Phil. So a little bit of a mix of bombers and plotters there. This, to me, is another one where this could be a year of weather-dependent majors. St. Louis in August, it could be 1,000 degrees there. This is where we're going back to my man, going back to the well for the PGA. If it's going to be hot and sticky, it's usually going to be soft. That means Rory's going to win. He just eats up long, soft golf courses. It's usually a shootout, probably will be again. I'll take Rory in the last time the PGA will be played in August.
Gun to your head, you mentioned the name, I have to ask. Gun to your head, more likely to happen in 2018. Tiger wins a major, or we see Anthony Kim on tour again?
Tiger wins a major. Anthony Kim, you can barely get a picture of the guy on Earth, let alone playing the tour. His settlement was $22 million to go away from the tour forever.
Have we seen the last of him?
But I don't think you'll see a picture of him again. There's no way he's coming back.
We've talked about Bellerive. We haven't seen that course in a while. Any other new courses on the PGA schedule for this year?
Nothing totally new. The playoffs, we get to see different tracks. Aronimink is back in the rotation, so that'll be fun for the Philly boys. Ironic's a great course. Glad to see that it's getting a tournament back. I think next year is really when you see some different courses. Tigers tournament, formerly known as the Quicken Loans, that'll have a new home. I think Barbasol is going to Kentucky, so that'll have a new home. The Players will be in March. The PGA will be at Bethpage in May next year. So that'll be the biggest wrinkle in the schedule, having the PGA, the second major, in May in New York. So we'll see. Next year's the big schedule change, though.
Any new formats or rules implemented this year, or close to what you're hearing being implemented?
I don't know when all the rules even they get announced. I never know when they go into effect. I think the only rule or kind of tournament change that's of note would be the USGA changing their playoff format.
And your thoughts on that?
You know, I probably don't hate that they're going away from a full 18-hole. I like the 4-hole playoff that the Open Championship does. I think it's fair. I think it's enough golf. Everyone will probably defend the 18 holes just because of Tiger Rocco. But I think we've had some good 4-hole playoffs in the British Open. I think that for a mixture seems like the way to go. 2 is I don't know, very arbitrary and weird. The odds of it still being tied after 2 holes is probably pretty good. So why not just make it 4? It's kind of weird. It seems like the USGA trying to be weird and different like they have been the last few years.
Do you anticipate them keeping it that way, or are we going to have to see 1 or 2 happen and then they change it?
I think they'll keep it that way for at least 10 years. USGA isn't one to admit a mistake that quickly. So I have a hard time believing they're just going to change it willy-nilly like that.
Yeah, I think you're right when it comes to that. How about?
Could be, it depends on the course, but it could be pretty awesome if they get a good, a great course. Like Pebble, I don't know what the holes would be. My guess is 17, 18, but it could be really cool if they got a good course and pick the 2 best holes.
It's interesting that you bring up Tiger and Rocco as the last playoff. If you eliminate that one, we have to go back to 01, where Goosen beat Mark Brooks in a playoff. Prior to that was Ernie Els at Oakmont against Colin Montgomery and Lauren Roberts.
Yeah, my guess is the USGA took a look at that, and that's why they kind of decided that. I'm not sure if you get Mark Brooks versus Lauren Roberts in today's U.S. Open. I'm not sure the ratings are going to be too great on Monday.
There's been a lot of talk this year about slow play. Give me your thoughts on it and what can be done.
Nothing will be done. I don't think. The players kind of wield too much control. Nothing will be done when it's stars or the tournament is on the line. They're too worried about player pushback, I think. Just yesterday, Francesco Molinari was handed out 2 warnings, and he kind of went on a Twitter tirade about how it was his partner, and he didn't even, he wasn't even on the clock. His partner wasn't. He's the one who got penalized. So I think the whole thing needs to be revisited and re-looked at. I'm not sure, other than penalizing them strokes, to me, nothing else will affect their routines. They don't care about 10 grand, 15 grand. Strokes is the only thing that's going to do it.
Do you see that ever happening?
No, I don't. It hasn't affected them now, so why would they change it?
Before we get into specific guys, any equipment changes of note?
Biggest one is probably Sergio. There wasn't as much movement as people thought. There's some guys, Tony Finau signed with Ping, but Sergio, after winning the Masters, after being with TaylorMade for the better part of 15 years, moved to Callaway. He already won in Thailand, so clearly it has not been a hindrance to him.
Well, let's highlight a couple guys. Give me a sentence or two, thought on each as we go through the list. We'll start with DJ.
For DJ, to me, it's all about the majors. When everything is equal, everyone's clicking, he's clearly the best player in the world. So at this point in his career, in his prime, he needs to try to win a major a year for the next 5 years.
Rory.
Boy, he's still young. I think he needs to have a good multiple win season and at least contend in a major, or else this could be a what-if type of career. He won 4 majors really quickly, and I think the pressure will start to mount on him if he doesn't win one the next year or two.
I was just going to ask you, at what point does the narrative change if he has another mediocre year this year?
He's approaching, he's still got a couple years. I think when he hits 30, and if he hasn't won another major, I think that's when everyone says, wow, is this going to be a what-if? Because he was in the Jack Tiger world of 4 majors by 25. If he doesn't win one by 30, I think we start talking about it more seriously.
Jordan Spieth.
I have a question mark near him. Just, he won the Open last year, and he won 2 other times, and he won $9 million. I think this is a question of expectations. We still keep going back to that 2015 season, and I think, that's unrealistic. So, to me, if he can just do what he's done the last 5 years, or 4 years, he'll be considered one of the best. So, I'm not going to put too much stock into his early season struggles. I think he figures it out.
Your boy...
if you want one hole for Jordan Spieth that will define his year, it will be the 12th at Augusta.
Your boy, Ricky Fowler.
Clown. Is that a big enough sentence? He can only win coming from behind. He's proved that his whole career. If he's 3 or 4 back, he has a chance to win. When he has the lead, his game just crumbles. Everyone's calling for him to win a major this year. I don't know. Maybe he does, but I don't see it.
Justin Thomas, who's off to a great start.
Yeah, I think he continues. I think he has a big year. We just went through the majors. To me, 3 of them are so weather dependent that it's very hard to predict. I think the PGA is probably his best chance to win, but I think he wins 4 or 5 times this year.
If you had to place a bet on somebody to win multiple majors, is he at the top of the list?
Man, it's him or Dustin, but yeah, it's one of those 2 for me.
How about Jon Rahm?
To me, it's he's still so early in his career. Last year was really only his first full year on tour, but the talent level is so extreme. I think expectations have moved forward for him. He's proven he can win. Now it's majors for him too. Can he finally get in contention? He wasn't in contention in any of the majors last year. Rightfully so. He's a rookie basically in all of them. I think this year we'll see if he can get in contention in a major and kind of stay there, because he's, I hate saying this because he's so young, but he's had trouble not losing his mind when he hits a bad shot in final rounds this year, specifically. He's really faded on Sundays the last 2 months or so I'll be interested to see if he can hold his head a little bit.
One of your way too early picks in a major, Justin Rose.
Look, I love where Justin Rose at. He hits the ball almost as good as anybody. To me, it's just putting. If he has a good putting week, he's going to win. I think he's a threat to win at Augusta. I think he's a threat to win at the U.S. Open. He's proven he's won at Barrington, which to me is one of the best tests in golf. I don't think he has a chance at a place like Carnoustie, unless the wind doesn't blow. The PGA, he could win that too. He's one of those guys that I think has a strong enough and a versatile enough game that he could be a force anywhere.
Hideki Matsuyama.
Man, that's a weird name. He, after a huge year last year, he withdrew from the waist management with a wrist injury, and we haven't seen him since. And wrist injuries on tour have a history of knocking guys out for a while. Brooks Koepka is also in that boat. He won't be back till May. So Matsuyama, a lot of expectations this year, especially after kind of going down a stretch with Thomas in the PGA last year. But wrist injury scares me with a guy like him.
You mentioned him, so let's touch upon him. Brooks Koepka.
Yeah, it's kind of... This is going to be a weird season. The first half is lost. I think there was, he won the U.S. Open last year. Expectations through the roof this year. But that's something that's tough to come back from. And he's going to have to do it because he's so high up on the Ryder Cup points list. He kind of only has to make 3 cuts maybe, and he'll be on the team. He's almost a lock for the team, so he's going to have to come back, and he's going to have to play well for the U.S. to win, I think. So he's in a tough spot.
Jason Day.
I mean, through all the injuries, all the sicknesses, he pops up and he wins at Torrey. He was holding his back. He was having trouble bending over, so I'm sure this won't be the last time this year that we hear about an injury, but he knows how to win. I'll give it to him. He wins. When he's there, he wins.
Sergio.
Sergio's a weird one. I'm in a league where it's like fantasy football where you do a snake draft, but with tour golfers. I did not want Sergio. He's such a good player, but I think winning the Masters last year, I wonder if that kind of put a ribbon on his career and he's good just riding off, or if he really does want more. I have a question about that.
Daniel Berger.
Love Daniel Berger. He doesn't get talked about, rightfully so. He hasn't won like Thomas and Spieth and Koepka have, but he's got some serious game. Makes a ton of birdies. I think he just needs to limit the big numbers, that plague a lot of the young guys. He won last year. He won the year before. I think he gets another win this year. I think he takes a step forward and puts his name, somewhere up there with all those other young guys.
Phil Mickelson.
Glory's last shot. 48, I think he is now. So time's winding down. He looks great so far this year. His short game looks awesome, as always. He looks rejuvenated. I think the Ryder Cup is his big motivation. I actually think Shinnecock's a decent venue for him. He's seen it probably more than anybody that's going to be playing this year. It kind of caters to the short game a little bit. People probably have written him off for it, but I don't know. I think this is a sneaky last chance just for him to complete the career Grand Slam, and I think he really wants to be on the Ryder Cup team.
Thomas Peters.
Man, I love his game. He's kind of fallen off the last 6 months or so, ever since the Ryder Cup. But man, that Ryder Cup a year and a half ago, I think he was 4-0-1. I can't remember exactly, but he was the best player for Europe. He's got that type of game. He's not playing over here. He's just that tour membership, so you'll see him mostly in majors and WGCs. But I wouldn't be shocked at all to see his name pop up at Augusta. Matt
Kuchar.
Getting up there. Kuchar's over 40 now. He's just a ATM machine. Guy wins $4 million every year. Mark it down. He hasn't won though in a couple of years, so I think he's itching to get back in that winner's circle. We'll see, but he's still making a ton of cuts. He'll probably see his name on the Ryder Cup team as well.
Bubba.
Rejuvenated. Last year was just a disaster for him, and you could probably point to 5 different things. To me, when you're a tour pro, you don't mess with something like the ball, a piece of equipment that's that important. You don't just switch to a brand that has never had a male PGA Tour player play it, like Volvic, and expect to win. He's back to the Pro V1, and he's already won this year, so, it's kind of Bubba being Bubba, I guess.
Patrick Reed.
I have his name in the disappointment list. He's sort of becoming a team specialist guy. His last win was in the playoffs with Bethpage 2 years ago. He's one of those guys that made equipment changes. He has a mixed bag. No club sponsor this year. I actually saw that he has an old set of Nike irons in the bag. He's turned into a guy that wins once a year or once every 18 months, but he is not a consistent player. But boy, does he get up for the cups.
And last one, Kevin Kisner.
He is a name I would love to see make the Ryder Cup. He's going to have to win somewhere. But there's a point in the schedule where it seems like every year he starts playing well. He's a southern guy, so maybe it's just when the weather gets warmer. But from April till about July, he seems to play well every year. And I don't see why this year would be any different. Hilton Head or the Players, somewhere like that, he'll probably win.
How about any guys under the radar that may not win but will be solid?
I have a couple guys. One's already won. Patrick Cantlay. Probably not a name a ton of people know, but he was the best amateur in the world for years. One of the better college players. Had a back injury, had a couple personal issues with his best friend passing away, so he was away from golf for almost 4 years. He's already a winner this year. He plays a light schedule because of the back issues that he had. But when he plays, if you look at his numbers, he is a top 20 player in the world. I think we can see his name on a ton of leaderboards and maybe in a certain team event in the fall. Tony Finau, the other guy I have written down, God, he's just drips talent. If he could ever get a short game just to average, he would win a few times a year because he just kills the ball. He's got DJ-type length. He's knocked on the door tons of top tens. He just hasn't broken through for that full field type of win yet.
How about somebody that golf fans who don't follow it as close as you do may not know, but you have your eyes on?
How about the name Xander Schauffele? He won the Tour Championship last year. He won twice last year. He was Rookie of the Year. I bet you if you asked 10 people, they would have no idea what or who a Xander Schauffele is. He is a really good player. Another one of the young guys who's in that age with Spieth and Rahm and Thomas. I think he's going to win again this year somewhere. He's in contention already this week in Mexico. He's going to be a guy that people will go, who is that? I don't know why, because he won twice last year, but he's just a name that people seem to forget.
Any other names that you want to touch upon before we move ahead to the Ryder Cup talk?
That's all I have written down.
Well, let's start with the Ryder Cup projection by making official Europe plus 125.
Yeah, official bet. Already down to 110, by the way. It changed last week.
Well, you better hop on it now before Europe becomes a minus.
I agree. I think U.S. Open time, I think, is when you see Europe become the favorite.
So many factors. But give me your projection on what the Euro team may look like.
Yeah, very early still because there's huge points at the majors still to be awarded. They kind of go by a different system than we do. They have two different point systems. The names I have written down, though, and one of these I'm not sure the eligibility. You kind of have to have, for Europe, you have to be a European Tour member to make the Ryder Cup team. That means you have to play, it used to be a minimum of, I think think 12 events. This year it's lower. They're trying to get some of the guys that play in America back on the Euro team, specifically Paul Casey. So I have a star written down next to Casey's name. He'll make the team if he's eligible. Other names: Roy, Stenson, Rose, Sergio, John Rahm, Tommy Fleetwood, Alex Noren, Thomas Peters, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Tyrell Hatton, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, and Paul Casey. That is my current 12 for the Euro team.
How about one or two guys that are going to be right around, are going to be in the discussion all year, whether they make it or not?
I think those last 3 or 4 will be Fitzpatrick, Hatton, Cabrera-Bello, Peters maybe, although I think Peters will be on the team based on what he did last time and his partnership ability. So I think those 3, Hatton, Fitzpatrick, Cabrera-Bello, are going to be the ones that are going to have to battle with the old stalwart names of Westwood, Poulter, guys like that could be in the discussion if they play just okay this year and on the outside looking in.
How about for the Americans?
USA was a little harder when you get past a certain point. But right now, DJ, Thomas, Spieth, Fowler, Reed's not anywhere near the top 10, but he's a lock. I think we would both agree.
Yes.
Brooks Koepka, he's going to be on the team. So unless he withdraws his name because of injury, he'll be on the team. Then it's kind of a crapshoot. I have Phil. I think he sustains good enough play to make the team on points. I think Brian Harmon will make the team. He would basically have to fall off a cliff not to make it at this point. So I think he'll be on the team, which will be an interesting pairings guy. And then after that, I have Cooch, Bubba, Daniel Berger, Patrick Cantlay rounding up the team. And I think the 2 names I mentioned a few minutes ago, Xander Schauffele, Tony Finau, are kind of the interchangeable parts here.
After you laying that out, I may go back into the pocket for some more on the Europeans.
The Euro team I had written down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I had 8 without hesitating or looking at anything. The Americans I wrote down 5 and then needed to look at on some websites. I think the Americans, at the top are just as strong. But that kind of 6 to 14 guy are very interchangeable. There's some guys that I would love to see make the team, specifically Berger and Cantlay. There's some guys I think are huge liabilities, specifically Bubba. Some names like Kisner, I don't have him written down. If he wins, though, I think he would be exactly what the Americans need on an away game. He's the bulldog, hits it straight, great putter. So, a lot to be determined, but right now, I don't know, that Euro team looks strong.
Way too early, but your player of the year prediction.
I went to this earlier to the well of guys that could win multiple majors, and I had a toss-up between DJ and JT. I'm going to go DJ player of the year. I know it's a little bit of a cop-out. He's the number 1 player in the world, blah, blah, blah. I just think, week in, week out, he's the most consistent guy. Justin Thomas is close for me, but he still will throw in that week of an odd missed cut. Like last year, he missed a cut at the Travelers Championship. You just don't see that from DJ. DJ's off week now is, his week at Riviera, people were upset that he finished T16. So for me, that kind of gives him the edge.
Any other topics, guys? Anything you want to touch upon before we conclude the golf preview?
Not on the PGA Tour, I don't think. We'll have probably a month or 2 from now, we'll have the 5th major preview, the Harry Saxton Memorial. Teams yet to be announced, so that's why it's off the board at this point.
Shout out to the coach who's in a battle as we speak with Dayton.
Yeah.
Spiders up 14-13 late in the first quarter.
That is a winnable game for the Spiders. Coach laid it out.
Fantastic job by you breaking down the preview for the PGA Tour 2018.
Appreciate the hosting job. Golf clap. Thank you, sir.
Great job. Great to be back. We'll be back next week where we break down the NBA season and give our predictions down the stretch.
Lot to digest with the association. Looking forward to it.
Talk to you soon, bud.
See you, buddy.